Welcome to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. I'm Beth Stallwood, founder of Create WorkJoy and the host of the podcast today. Today I am joined by the fantastic Scott Morrison, and we talk about this on the show, but I watched Scott do a presentation and I just loved his energy and how he talked about things and how he helped people. So I decided to persevere in asking him to be on the podcast, and he eventually gave in and came along, and it's such an interesting conversation about his method of helping people to move forward, to take on challenges, to get past problems and to create better futures for themselves, their teams, their businesses, whatever it is that they're looking to make better. I had such a great time and got loads of energy from listening to this, and how the really interesting thing about how his business called The Boom is creating a business around the feeling that he wants people to have, and how aligned that is with the idea of WorkJoy. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. I'll pop back on at the end to tell you more about what I'm taking from it. Hello and welcome to the WorkJoy Jam. I'm really excited to be joined today by Scott Morrison, and I cannot wait to have this conversation. I'm so excited about it. So what I'm going to do first of all is to hand over to Scott. Scott, tell us a little bit about you rather than me introducing you, which is always a bit weird. Tell us about you, what you do, how you got to where you are today.
Brilliant. Thanks, Beth. It's great to be part of the show. My name is Scott Morrison. I started actually many years ago. I started working in advertising, and I committed myself when I was at York University that I wanted to go and work at a place in advertising where everybody at least knew the name, so I wouldn't ever have to explain where I worked. And so as a result of that, I started at Saatchi & Saatchi, which was probably the only advertising agency anyone had ever heard of.
Yeah.
And what particularly attracted me to the agency was the wonderful philosophy and the culture of the business, which was all about nothing is impossible. And it literally was. The things that we did, the fun that we had, the energy we created, just everything that we did at the agency was absolutely fantastic. And I spent a long time there, rising from a graduate to an account director. And the only way I would ever leave that role, which I did, was for the opportunity to run the Nike business, and that came in the early 2000s. So I left Saatchi's, went to Wieden and Kennedy, ran the Nike business, and actually had one of my biggest life lessons, which was when you start somewhere new, if you don't try and embrace the culture that you're moving into and try and bring the culture that you came from into that, then it will often backfire. And it did. And I didn't have the best of times trying to work with the culture in that business. But it taught me a great lesson. And out of that lesson, I decided, actually, I'm not going to do advertising anymore. And I always had this vision of creating a very broad, almost kind of like portfolios type of career. And I decided I'm going to go client side. So my first client role was marketing director for Levi's. And so we relaunched Levi's, rebuilt the business, and turned the business around actually in the UK and in Europe. I left there to go and weirdly follow one of my passions, which I love gaming. And so I was headhunted to become the marketing director for Activision. So at Activision, we launched, the brief was to turn it from a kind of a bedroom business to a blockbuster entertainment business. And so we relaunched Call of Duty Modern Warfare. We did Guitar Hero, all those games that people now know and they're sort of household names. And then my final role before I set my own business up was the marketing commercial director for Diesel. So a brand that I'd loved for many years. Again, loved the culture, only the brave for successful living, and had a great time. Again, rebuilding the brand, rebooting the brand, building fantastic team. And it set me on my path to create my own business. I have two businesses. One which is what we're going to talk a lot about today, The Boom. And the other one is a company called Loops, which is a creative platform. But everything that I do is geared around helping on Block, Unlock and Unleash commercial, creative and cultural impact in people and teams and organisations. I believe that everybody should have the opportunity to create the future that they want to see. And that's what we do at The Boom. It's all about how do you build, create, impact so that you can change the world effectively. And that's where we are today.
Love it.
Hence how we met when
Yeah,
speaking.
I totally love it. And one thing that I just really rested on there was, it sounds like you were so determined while you were at university and knew what you wanted to do. I love it. So many people do not have any idea.
Oh, can I just dispel
tell
that
me.
myth, Beth? Because I didn't have a clue. I really, actually, the weird thing was, I didn't have any clue what I wanted to do at university when I left. I was going to be a lawyer, and then I was going to be a journalist. And there are two people, Tim Duffy and Marcus Peffers, both of who are now very senior M&C Saatchi. And they inspired me when they came to present. They did that kind of milk round thing that people used to do at universities. Yeah. And they showed me this incredible, it was all built on the culture of the organisation. That's what sold me. This idea of nothing is impossible, and live your dreams, work at the biggest ad agency in the world. And I knew nothing about advertising. And it was that inspired me to go and work at Saatchi's. And so it's always a great lesson. Like, when you don't know what you want to do, sometimes you've just got to follow what where your heart tells you to go, where your passion is, where you kind of think you're going to culturally fit in. And, don't worry about the job role and everything else. Go for the culture, stay for the role in the end.
Yeah, and it's such good advice. And one of the things I was just thinking about with that is, you followed the place that you thought would give you some joy. So I'm going to relate back to work.
Exactly.
You wanted to work in that culture with that mission, with that type of attitude, and those people who really inspired you. And you found your career by following the joy.
Exactly. That's absolutely true. And I that's what I love about the name of this podcast. I think it's just so brilliant, because it's subtly something in my whole career that I've always sought, and I've always actually found, by making sure that the culture of the business that I work in allows for plenty of joy to come through the work that you do. And the one story I did say, the only time I haven't really consciously thought about joy in what I work, I had the most miserable time, and I would never wish that on anybody. But it did teach me a very valuable lesson. So. Yeah. It's sometimes you kind of got to see what you don't have in order to appreciate what you have.
For sure. And one of the things we always say in the kind of my WorkJoy philosophy of life is, you don't feel joy all the time. It's not one of those things. It's 100% of the time. And sometimes you need to feel I call it work gloom, and that can either be a chronic or a acute problem, is that you sometimes have to feel that to realize where your joy really is.
Absolutely
so
right.
It sounds like that experience that you had was like, actually, no, I didn't follow the joy. I followed the job, and the job didn't bring the joy because of the culture.
So right. I mean, I often, I often say, I even said it in the intro, that, the only thing that would have made me leave Saatchi's, and I had a few opportunities, but it was the chance to go and run the Nike business. And I followed that, and I didn't do enough thinking about what was going to be joyful about where I was going. I just followed blindly the thing that I thought was going to bring joy, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So it's a really valuable lesson.
And an amazing career, and clearly working with some super cool brands. That's a really I am not a cool person, and I have for many years accepted that I am not a cool person. But that is some cool work that you were able to do there.
Well, thank I mean, who's to judge what cool is? I genuinely think that anyone's doing, especially what you're doing, and the podcast and your story and what you're about, there's plenty of coolness absolutely in that, and often, people often say, oh yeah, those brands are really cool and you must have done loads of cool stuff, and without putting too much daylight into the magic, yes, they are cool. Yes, we do a lot of cool things, but actually, when you are working in those brands, you also see a lot of the boring stuff that goes on behind brands like that, and all the stuff that you think, oh, don't you do that as well?
There's always boring stuff, right?
You've always got to order loo roll. Yeah, you know what I mean.
There's always got to be, someone's got to photocopy stuff, and still got to send the bills out and chase payment, but all of the stuff. I mean, some people find a lot of joy in that. That's not where I would find the joy, but but that's the thing, and I talked to a lot of people about this, is that the shininess and the coolness of jobs, there is always stuff within them that is the work gloom stuff. And some of that can be minimized. And some of that is that's just part of life. We don't always get to do all the things we want to do all the time. But it's an amazing career. And what I want to do now is, because obviously, like, when I heard about you, Scott, and I saw you present, and I was like, oh, I need to get Scott on my podcast. So,
you were very persistent.
I was persistent. So
Yes.
Thank you very much for either giving in to the persistence or enjoying the fact that you kind of connect with it.
I definitely connected with it, and I definitely connected with the series and what you're about. So that's exactly why I thought it'd be great to do it.
And with I want to hear more about the boom, because for me, the boom is like, okay, yeah, WorkJoy and the boom, that we're on aligned here, and I want to hear more about it, because I think this idea that you have around, the process of unblocking, unlocking, and unleashing. I want to hear more about that. But tell me more about the boom first of all, and then we can dive into your process and how it all works.
It's really funny because when I people often ask me why it's called the boom, and it was a great lesson for me actually, because when you run brands and businesses and you're always giving advice, or you're always thinking about someone else's brand and someone else's business, and you become quite an expert at it because you're almost removed from it. And then, of course, when it comes to your own thing, I fell into the classic trap. They always say a joiner's cupboards are always broken, or those kind of classic phrases. Yeah. And so when I started my own business, I literally thought of it as starting a business, and I didn't apply any of the thinking that I had as a kind of a long-term marketer and someone who'd spent time with brands and advertising. And so I said, right, I'm going to start this, quite functional. I'm going to find out a few things. So I did a lot of testing, experimenting, but I didn't think in the right way. I didn't engage with my audience. I didn't engage with the people I was trying to work with in the right way. And so I didn't find much joy in the work I was doing. And one day I was asked to go and speak at a fantastic conference over in Austria. And they said to me, Scott, we really want you to come and speak. We want you to tell us exactly what you are going to speak on and tell us the name of your business and everything. But you've only got 15 minutes to do it because we're going to put everything out. It's going live. And I was like, wow, that's a bit of a deadline. But the brilliant thing was that deadline made me focus that I wasn't doing the right thing. And I thought, I'm going to be in front of there was the audience, there was like 1,800 people in the audience that we were going to speak to. So this is a great opportunity to go with the thing that I really does bring me joy. And I went back to some core principles. So the name The Boom came out of the fact that in my team when we were at Diesel, when everything was going brilliantly, or when someone had just done something amazing, the first thing everyone would say was boom, and I was like, that feeling that it used to engender in me and in the team, it was just a moment where you just went, as soon as you heard that, you just went, that is joyful.
Yeah.
I feel great. I know that everyone's doing what they want to do. I know that people are performing. And so I thought to myself, wouldn't that be great if that's how my clients could feel when we'd worked together? And actually, more, sort of broader than that, I thought, isn't that how everyone wants to feel when they're doing their best work, when they're creating the future, when they're delivering the stuff that they want to do? Don't you just want to look at what you're doing and just go, boom?
Yeah.
And so I decided, right, that's what I'm going to call my business. I'm going to call my business the feeling that I want people to have. And it allows me to ask that question when I say to people, say to them when they say, well, what do you do and how does it work? I always ask them a question now. What's one word that you would use when everything's going exactly how you want it to go in your business and your life? And they go, oh, boom. I go, yeah, there you go. Don't you want more of that feeling? Yes, right, then let's talk. So with that, I decided that actually from all the work that I'd done over the years that I'd been working advertising and brands, it wasn't about change. Like change is constant. It was actually about, and it wasn't about these kind of buzzwords that people say, transformation and this and that, turnaround, which is what I loved doing. But actually it was about impact. And it was about, everyone comes to work, you look at all these things by Gallup and everything else. People want to come to develop and grow and take on more responsibility and ultimately create impact. Nobody comes to work. I always say no one comes to work to mess things up. People come to work to make a difference, right? And if you can do that in a joyful way, and if you can create those kind of things, isn't that great? Doesn't that make you go boom? So I was like, okay, which areas do we want to work in? And I was like, well, creativity is a massive thing in every business. Everyone wants to be more creative. Commerciality, like commercial thinking. How do you think differently? And then culturally, like how do we organize ourselves? How do we think about our mental health? And how do we get people to perform at their best? All those areas that I was really interested in. And I needed to pull together a really simple operating system that underpinned it all, because there's nothing worse than having a simple idea and then talking loads about models and this and that people don't get.
Yeah.
And so, but the interesting thing about simplicity, of course, as you know, is it takes ages to get to simplicity. Everyone goes, that's really simple, those three words. I'm like, it took me 6 years.
I always think that, though, isn't it, is that simplicity is one of the hardest things to create.
Absolutely
And
right.
it takes way more thinking than some of the complexity. So yeah, I totally get that. I totally get it.
It's true. And you know, I think it's a differentiator for me. I often say, you know, when I go into sessions or go into meetings or whatever, I say, listen, I'm simple. I am genuinely a simple guy. One of my dear friends, he identified what he would call a superpower. He calls it a unicorn superpower that I have, that he also has, that I didn't know until he'd explained it to me, which is I'm a synthesizer. So I'm able to hear lots of different complex stories or points of view and everything else, and be able to condense it into a kind of a pithy, simple framework for people to go, oh yeah, that's exactly what we mean.
Yeah.
And I used to kind of think, I didn't think anything of that, but then now I realise that it's a superpower. And so me calling out the fact that look, I am simple, so I look for simplicity, has really helped me. And in creating the operating system, I didn't want it to be some sort of big model and complicated thing. I wanted it to be something pithy and catchy that people will go, right, I'm going to use that every day.
Yeah.
So I broke it down into unblock, unlock, unleash. And I call that the operating system for creating real impact. And it really simply was based on watching lots of businesses and how I'd worked in the past. All the mistakes I'd made, by the way, this is not, you know, I'm no evangelist in all this stuff. I've made loads of mistakes in my career, and all of them have helped me learn how to try and create some success out of all of that. And what I found was that loads of businesses are great and people are great at unlocking ideas. You know, any issue, anything that happens in a business, people go, right, let's have a brainstorm. And there's loads of smart people and they come up with loads of stuff. But the key challenge that most businesses find is that either those ideas don't solve for the problem or the puzzle, as I call it, that they were intended to, so nobody does anything with it, or they just stay as brainstorm ideas and nobody actually takes any action to move anything forward. So none of this moves forward. And then 3 months later, everyone comes back and, you know, those problems that we had, or those puzzles, yeah, has anything happened with them? No, we haven't done anything about it. Why not? We did a massive brainstorm.
Yeah. It's like someone's got a flip chart somewhere with all of these amazing ideas
Exactly.
on it.
Hang on, let me bring the Post-its from last time. And they're all still there and they're all pristine, but nobody's done anything with it. And what I recognize is that actually the first part of creating any impact is to first unblock. So I talk about unblocking either what success looks like, because you should always start with what success. What are you trying? What's the impact you're trying to create? What do you do that is going to like bring your impact to the world, and what does that look like, and how can we visualize it and talk about it? So I often get people to simply unblock success, and then in the process of doing that, you also unblock any old thinking or old tools, old behaviors, old processes, things that aren't fit for purpose that would stop them from making that happen. Because once you get all that out on the table, you know what you're working with. You know then that you've got to solve for some of these things, or these things that if you don't deal with them, they'll come back and bite you. So any ideas you come up with, they won't work anyway. So once you get all that out, then we start to unlock new thinking, new ideas, inspiration, joining dots in new and interesting ways. And we have loads of fun with creative unblocking techniques. We might look at your business model, we might look at your customers, we might look at all sorts of different things and go, what happens if we did this? What about this? A lot of it's reframing people's thinking. And then the final, and I would call this the most important bit, is definitely unleash. And what unleash means is, simply put, how do we create action around this? And more importantly, what's the smallest possible action we could take to see whether this idea would work? And how can we measure it? Because if we don't do anything and just say, yeah, okay, we're going to leave that, and Dave and Doreen, you're going to work on that and come back to us in a month. Nobody does anything. So the reality is, it's like literally get all of that thinking, and I create canvases so that people can, and they're based around business model canvases, but that get the red thread of thinking into a really clear and concise execution. So you can go, right, we've taken this puzzle, we've thought through all these different things. These are the blockers, we've overcome them. Here's some thinking that's going to open our minds and create something amazing. And here's the action we're going to take as a result. And in doing that, I work with clients all over the world, in everything from advertising through to FMCG, through to creative and media and entertainment. And the simplicity of it is firstly very refreshing, but the way that these businesses apply for themselves this thinking, I just find incredible. Because from 3 simple words, we've relaunched brands, we've completely changed the internal culture, we have created a massive program of the future of work with some of my clients. And I often think all from 3 really, really simple words, there's a whole lot of creation and impact and indeed joy
Yeah.
come from it. So for me, the key is tying my business into a feeling has been really important because it engenders joy in me as well as joy in my clients. And then allowing the simplicity of a tiny framework, a tight framework, and tools that sit in it, but means that people can have fun and have joy in experimenting with that. And as I was saying to you earlier, I've just been with a client today, and we've just looked at their team and the future of their team, and we did some great stuff on unblocking what success looks like, and then coming up with some ideas. And I deliberately do it in short bursts of time. Hence, Boom is also a kind of a speed thing. It's like there's no point in spending 4 hours overthinking everything. Let's do 45-minute chunks and see where we get to. And the mix of speed, the tools, the space in their minds to be able to do this sort of thing. Really, it was just so joyful watching that team work together today. It's the first time they've been together for a year in a room together for a start off. But just seeing them engage with each other and open their minds and think through things, all of that genuinely brings me absolute work joy. So that's the Boom and what we do.
I love it. And I have about 75 questions based on what you just told me. So I'm going to try and make it like 3. So first of all, I think we're very aligned on this of naming your business about the feeling that you want to get.
Yes,
so obviously
exactly.
Exactly. Is there, Boom is there. And I love how you're thinking about it, because that for me is the same thinking, is that I want to feel work joy when I'm working on WorkJoy. I want the people who are working on it to get it. I want people everywhere to feel that. And that Boom thing, it just really, I find it really grounding actually. Although it's exciting, it's quite grounding, but it's like, this is what it's actually really about. Then we get into the simplicity method of unblock, unlock, and unleash. And I love that you obviously underneath that sit lots of tools and amazing things that you can do. The thing that really resonated in my head when you were talking about it is how often we start with trying to unlock it and not unblocking it first. And that power of really defining what you're actually looking for. What's the impact? What's the thing that you're trying to get to? And there's a little bit in my mind, and tell me if I'm wrong here, or, where you would come at this from, is so often we start with the problem. And what you're actually doing there is making people look at what's the bigger picture of this? What's the positive outcome first? So you're actually doing that before you then go and look at how do we unlock the actual issue?
Absolutely. I'm always astonished, to be honest, Beth, with it's the thing that, whenever we start with a massive challenge, the propensity for everyone just to jump in and go, right, I've got my opinion, here's how we're going to do it, blah, blah. And it gets so executional and so micro in seconds, and so subjective and opinionated that by the time you've got to any kind of solution, it's like a tiny executional detail that's kind of missed the point. And so what's always interesting whenever I do one of the exercises that I do is called the movie poster. And it's all about visualizing success and creating a series of components that would best define what success looks like and putting them all together in the medium of a movie poster. And watching the discussions and the conversations and the thinking and the future kind of thinking that comes out of that, and making people really think, like, what would people be saying? Who are the people you're going to be working with? What would literally what would success look like? And suddenly what that opens up is that the puzzle that they've come in with, that they think is what they need to be solving, is one of maybe several, or is a microcosm of something even bigger once they start to think about what success looks like. And so and also because, when you get everyone in a room together like that, say you've got 30 people in a room who, and this isn't the case from today, but in the past when I've done, you have 30 and different stakeholders sometimes from different businesses. If the first thing you ask them to do is to start, thinking about the challenge itself and come and brainstorming with them, nobody's had any chance to warm up their thinking, warm up their mind, warm up their connection. Just sit back and listen, because everyone's wanting to add their 10p into the conversation. So I find that, having people think about success and just giving them that an hour just to think it through and have deeper conversations brings everyone together and opens different conversations, opens different parts of your brain, makes you ask questions that you hadn't even considered, puts you in the other stakeholders' shoes for a second before you start, sharing your point of view or your opinion, helps you listen to what's really going on. And that engenders a whole different set of responses to how we go about unleashing action at the end of it than it would if you just jump in and say, right, how are we going to solve this?
Yeah. And what's great about it is I love the way you've put it as unblocking, because I think that for me really says something. It really kind of, and I know that obviously getting to that simple thing took a lot of time. Well done for making it, because it's really great.
Thank you.
But this isn't new thinking, right? So even if you look back at Stephen Covey and his habits, the first one is start with the end in mind, right?
Exactly.
That's from the 70s, I think.
Yes.
Was it the 70s? That's 40 something years old now, but we're still not good at doing it. So actually, really working through that and understanding it. And the other thing that really came to mind there when you were talking about it is what you're trying to avoid, I think, when you're doing it, is we all have self-serving bias in our brain. It is what's the solution that would be best for me,
yes,
or best for my team, or best for my area of the business, or best for the thing that I am most connected to, right? Is that if you start looking from a bigger picture perspective and thinking about what we're actually trying to get to, it sort of maybe dampens the self-serving bias a little bit to be able to open up to what everybody needs and what everybody wants.
Absolutely right. And it's just weird because you kind of get uncanny alliances happening, as people start talking about the future and thinking, oh yeah, well, you do a bit of that. Yeah, I do that. Oh, that'd be quite good if we did that. And before you know it, the thing that was the challenge has already been solved because somebody's gone, I think this is what the future looks like. And, Steve and I have decided that this is what we think the future would look like from our perspective. All right, that's handy because that was one of the challenges we were going to talk about today. Oh, right, okay, cool.
Yeah, we're all on board now. So,
yeah, exactly. So it's, I just think that anything, people often talk about doing things like icebreakers and that sort of stuff. And I kind of get it, but I like to get teams to always be reframing their thinking, never to be just sitting in the, that kind of bubbling pot of what we already know, but bring it to the room because it's one of the things we have to unblock actually, but always be thinking about, well, how do you trick the brain into thinking slightly differently? How do we get a different perspective here? How do we reframe what we've got? How do we just to flip it on its head so we can totally see another side to something? And more often than not, I genuinely believe that people in a business know the answers.
Yeah.
You've just got to trick the brain enough to get them to get rid of the biases and the subjectivity, and the answers will come collectively from the group. So that's a lot of the work I do.
Yeah, I work with a lot of organisations who'll say to me things like, "Oh, we need to, get someone in to come and help us, find the answer to the problem." And I say, okay, do you need to get someone in to find the answer to the problem, or do you need to get somebody in to unlock the answers that are already here? Because your people know your business better than anyone else. They will probably know what the problems are. They'll probably somewhere in their head have the solution. It's just that they've not had the space or the right environment or the right questions asked of them to get it out.
It is so true. It reminds me of the story of Mike Asbrahoff, who was he was asked to go and take over, I think, the USS Benfold, which was the worst performing ship in the US Navy. And his task was to turn it into the Top Gun because it was the most invested in ship in the American fleet. And his approach was just for me sums up exactly that kind of thinking that you talked about. Like the answers lie within the business. It was very, very simple. He on his first day walked around the ship and said, "Hello, I'm Mike," or whatever he would say. I'm a commander or whatever. And he asked the other person what their name was, and then he asked them the most kind of prescient question, which was, if there was one thing that you could do to make your job even better here, more efficient, what would it be? And he listened to everybody's answers. Like, for instance, they'd say, "Well, we're buying metal nuts and bolts for the ship hull, and they only last 3 years. And I think if we bought rubber ones, they would last 15 years. So that would save us, tens of thousands of dollars." And he went round everyone in the ship and asked them. And for the vast majority of everyone's advice, he said, "Right, okay, go and do it." Yeah. And his approach turned the ship around. Basically, is the Top Gun now of the US Navy. But those simple questions, that simple unlocking of people's answers within the business, and it's so simple as well because you have to ask 2 questions, and you've just made an impact.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show the kind of power of something like that if you play it right.
And I think that's a great bit of advice. So I'm always like, how do we make this practical for people? Is if you're in an organization and you have those ideas, is don't hold them back. I think there's something around being proactive with them. There's also something, if you're in a position of leadership, is start asking those questions.
Yeah.
If it's in a team meeting or a one-to-one or whatever it is you're doing, say something like, what is the one thing we could do to make your job better or easier, and see what it is. And no, you might not be able to have the gift to give them everything, but you probably can do some of them. And the
Yeah.
momentum and the joy and the actual wanting to give more ideas because you've been asked for them and they've been welcomed and you've done something with them will create more of that within your team. And you'll find, I think, a bit of momentum happening with it.
So true. One of the things I often talk about when I'm doing my leadership program is I say to leaders, don't create solutions that could hold you back. Keep asking questions that move you forward.
Yeah.
And I simply say that because, as leaders, we are often asked to come up with the answers and solutions. And you obviously, I mean, I was CMO at Diesel. I knew the answer to probably maybe 30% of all the questions that were asked to me because I just didn't have the context.
Yeah.
Some the technical questions you could answer, but should I do this deal or not? Well, if you have to answer every single question and give it a solution, you've got to. You're never going to have all the context possible in order to answer everyone's questions. You'd never get anything done. And so, if you put solutions in place without knowing the context, you're just simply it's going to hold everybody back because you're not going to have the context. So all you need to do is just keep asking questions. The other person will invariably come up with the answers. You've just got to be able to keep asking the questions that move you forward and move your team forward. And the more you do that, the better the team get educated at asking themselves the questions before they come to speak to you. And then they ask questions of their team members. And so you get this beautiful kind of flow through the business of people asking the right questions to keep things moving forward rather than people coming up with solutions that just hold the business back.
Yeah, love it. And it's so interesting to talk about it because I'm also then thinking about on a personal level. So for the individuals out there who want to maybe think about their career or think about the future, is that methodology could work there as well. So I'm sitting here thinking, if I'm sitting thinking about my career and what I want to do, and I'm an individual there, the first thing I could do is unblock stuff. I could think about, what does the future look like? What do I want it to be? How does that work there? And then what do I need to do to unlock stuff? What's the stuff that's stopping me? What are the habits? What are the things that aren't working? What does my self-talk like? So there's so many different ways of thinking and using this model. I think it's brilliant. So talk to me a little bit more about that bit. So unlocking, I think, it's that bit that we often go to. It's the brainstorming, it's the thinking about it. You then say the unleash bit. And as you said right at the beginning, this is the bit that you try and do that no one actually does. And you've got loads of ideas and it's all going to happen. And then the real world takes over and people go back to their, they've come out of a fantastic session with you or with one of their team members where they've been like all creative and posted note up and, it's been amazing and they feel all fired up. And then nothing happens. So this is the thing. I think this is the golden question. How do you get people to actually unleash those ideas and make them happen?
Yeah, it is a great question. And it boils down to how everything gets set up. So if you want to create impact, you've got to take accountability for that. And in my experience, back in the day of doing brainstorms and vision days and strategic away days, the ones that worked really well, where we were our most impactful, were the ones where we knew our going in point was, this is all about creating things that we are going to step up to, stand up for, and own as people and as part of the team. And we don't leave the room until there's an owner and there's clarity on movement forward. The ones that were the worst were the ones where it was just like, right, we're going to have some thinking and it's going to be a loose, keep it free, keep it loose. And at the end, you just had hundreds and hundreds of ideas, and literally everyone was looking at each other, going, "Well, that's cool. There's some nice ideas, but what next?" And it was that moment that what next never happens. And so I program that into the masterclasses and everything that I do, which is if you're coming into this, you're taking ownership of what I call the red thread from the start. What is the challenge and the puzzle that we're coming in with? You've got to own that. That's why we talk about unblocking success, because it's a great visualization. When you can see what you're going to achieve, you start to take accountability and ownership of what that's going to look like. And so the whole process that we go through gets you to the action that's going to help you achieve. I call it the boom state, by the way, the visualization of success. So everything you're going to do is going to get you to that boom state, which is going to create the most impact for you as a team, as an individual, as a business. So we're all in this together. And going back to simplicity, as I say, I create canvases that mean that we are able to translate people's thinking. So, you've got these great ideas. Now let's translate that into some really meaningful things that are going to reconfigure it back to the boom state and back to what we're trying to achieve either as an individual or as a business. So how are we going to measure it? What resources do we need? Who are the stakeholders? Some quite sort of technical things. And then we talk about, what's the smallest possible execution of it? When are you going to start that? What's the date we're going to report back on the first findings? And it's all captured on one page. So, at the end of a session, we might have 10 ideas. We've got 10 pages. And they're called the concept canvases. And people go away and go, right, I'm off. This is how we're holding each other to account. And I'll often go back in every couple of months and hold people to account. But more often than not, the team hold each other to account. And the reason they do that is because once you've created that kind of intent of the boom state and what success is going to look like, you want to create the alignment that goes with it. You want to do everything you possibly can, because that future feels really, really exciting. And it doesn't matter whether it's a team vision for the strategy of the next 3 years, or whether it's how are we going to deal with, the next 6 months, the next 3 months as we come out of lockdown. It can be any challenge you want, but the minute you start thinking about the future and the success is the minute you start taking accountability and creating the intent. And then if you get to the other end, when you get to that end where you're unleashing and unlocking and unleashing, you're creating the alignment that's going to make it happen. So it feels like you've really created something that's meaningful, actionable, and doable, rather than, loads of blue sky thinking that it's someone else's responsibility to make happen.
Yeah, I love that. One of my friends calls it the difference between creativity and crazy-tivity.
Love it.
It's that, and I love that. It's that you can all get into a room and do all the endless brainstorming and have lots of lovely things that come out of it. But I also love the idea here that you're moving it from that into, and you say that, you call them technical, the practical bits, the things that you actually need to do. So you almost within that zone of unleashing are getting super practical about making it happen and making sure that people are aligned to it, because you've had that conversation as you go through. I think that's, and finding that how you translate it into something and make it happen. I love the idea of concept canvas. It sounds very exciting.
Well, I think the interesting thing is, Beth, as well, is, we talked at the very beginning about working in cool brands and everything else. People used to say to me, it just must be like, crazy ideas and loads of thinking, and then people coming out with loads of, and just doing crazy stuff and doing whatever you want. And you go, well, there is an element of that in the unlocking bit, but the rigor and the discipline that's required. For example, we did the 30th birthday for Diesel, and we did 24-hour parties. So a party, every single time zone around the world had a party for 24 hours for Diesel to celebrate our 30th birthday. And people just go, yeah, that's really, that's just really straightforward. No, the level of precision and professionalism and accuracy and, capability required to unleash that idea, you've got to get into some real detail. None of it's sexy, none of it's cool, because, you're thinking about, well, how do we wire up an internet link from here to Brazil or whatever? You're doing all the kind of boring stuff. But that's the reality, and professional athletes or anyone will tell you, when you see Usain Bolt, as was, doing those breaking world records, or any of these athletes breaking world records, the unsexy, uncool bit is the everyday getting up at 7:00, 7:05, having a massage, 7:08, eating my breakfast, 7:23, ice bath, 7:27, run 1,000 meters, whatever. It's those boring things that you think, oh, you know what, the discipline of doing that. But that's the thing about unleashing, and it's having that rigor and that discipline. to actively think about what action needs to be taken and detail it. That is the difference between blue sky thinking and loads of happy brainstorms and the reality of translating great creative thinking to deliver the impact that you want to see.
Yeah, I love that. And I often talk about this is about I probably wouldn't put it in the same way, but what you talk about, the rigor and discipline there, is learn to find the joy in that stuff, because that's the stuff that actually you do most of your job within, is rigor and discipline. And if you can find the joy within the rigor and discipline, you will get the extra happy joy, like the amazing achievement joy of the bigger picture thing that you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
But if you just focus on the bigger picture thing you're trying to achieve and not the rigor and discipline, you're actually going to end up in what I would call a disappointment cycle.
Yes, totally agree. And also, if from my learning as well, if it doesn't bring you that joy, find somebody for who it does really, really bring joy, and bring them into the team quickly, because you'll get joy from seeing them be joyful, and you'll get the joy of delivering such great work.
Yeah, it's totally true. And that's where you then go into the whole world of work with your strengths. But I also think so. Strengths and joy, I would put together and say, work with the things that you're good at and that bring you joy. Yes. Because there are some things like, am I good at some things, but they don't bring me joy? Do I really want to do that all the time? And there might be some things that I'm bad at that do bring me joy, but the real sweet spot is the things, get people working on the things that they're really good at and that bring them joy. And if you can combine that together, the energy that you will create to get stuff done, to enjoy the rigor and discipline, to see that as part of the process, can be massively beneficial.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love it. I could totally carry on this conversation for many, many, many more hours, and we could dig into all of your tools, and we could take every little bit of information out of your brain. However, what I'm going to do for us now, because not everyone might want to listen to us chat for hours and hours and get like totally nerd out about how we do all these things, is, are you okay if I move you on to some quick fire questions?
Absolutely right. Let's go.
So, love it all. Unblock, unlock, unleash. Great methodology. It's in my head now. I'm going to go for it. But for you personally, let's dig a bit deeper here. What is one thing that's always guaranteed to bring you some work joy?
Oh, that's absolutely one of the things I often talk about as when I talk about my leadership stuff with the boom, and it's a thing that it still gets me out of bed in the morning, is seeing people deliver things they never thought possible. It goes back to my days at Saatchi's and the idea of nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
I there's nothing that gives me more joy in doing what I do than seeing somebody or seeing a team. Or just like today when I was with the team this morning and they were like, we're not quite sure what it's going to look like. And, I always ask what they want to get out of the session. At the end of it, they're all leaving going, that's amazing. That was incredible. And the future that they created for themselves that they're stepping into was just like a world away from where they were first thing this morning. And that for me is just what really brings me joy, giving people like the tools, the time and the space, getting out of the way and just watching them do things they never thought possible.
Amazing. I love that. And I love it how it links right back to that first bit where you found your joy in your career as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the whole thing is meant to be somehow, isn't it? We could go very deep into that one. Let's not do that right now. My second question for you is, what book are you currently reading?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask this. I'm reading, and I think we said this, I am reading about 4 books. I'm reading 3. Definitely. I'll tell you what they are, because I reread them actually more often than read them, because I just use them as constant resources. The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham, which is just a brilliant book, especially helping you unlock thinking about your business. It's a great book.
I've not read it. I'm going to put that on.
Definitely put it on the list. The other one I'm reading is The Untethered Soul by Michael A. Singer. Less reading, it's more of an I audio book stuff, to be honest, rather than read it generally. And that's much more about living with the now and surrendering to what is happening rather than trying to take overarching control over everything all the time. Just surrender and allow things to happen and see what happens for you. But maintain your intent, but just chill out a bit. 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, I just started reading. That's by Yuval Noah Harari. People probably know from Sapiens. I've read his other 2 books, so this is I hadn't got round to listening to this one yet because I just thought it was a bit deep and a bit hairy given the pandemic. But I thought I'll give it a go now. And then my last book that I haven't got yet, but I'm just going to recommend this to anybody who hasn't tried. Mark Billingham he's a comedian, was a comedian. He writes the Tom Thorne novels, and he writes a new one every year, and he's done about 16. I've read every single one of them. They are, if you like true crime, well, it's not true crime, it's fictional crime, but it's beautifully written, incredible crime stories that are ever twisting and really play with your brain. And I love them. So I'm waiting. I've pre-ordered it. It'll be out in the next week. But by the time this goes out, I'll have read it.
I love the variety you've got in there. And I'm the same. I always have like a couple of novels and a couple of work type books, and usually one other random thing that's appeared in one go. So a great range of recommendations. I'm definitely the thing I started doing a few years ago is whenever anyone recommended me a book, I just order it straight away.
Yeah, that's it.
I now have a pile of about 50 unread books. But it never goes down because there's just more and more and more. I love a book. I'm a total nerd for it. So I love it.
It's good.
Right. I'm going to go into, again, your personal world of things. I would love to know what the best advice somebody has given you in your life that you always find yourself coming back to.
Well, I'm going to go with something recent, actually. If anyone there's one bit of advice I would always go back to, but I'm going to let your listeners do some homework on this, and it's the moment that I was in the presence of Nelson Mandela, and something that he did taught me an incredible bit about, literally taught me some leadership advice. But I'm going to let people seek that out on my website. It's called The Dance Like Mandela. It's a blog that I've written.
Okay.
Because it's too long a story to tell now, because we've not got very long. We're on quickfire, so I want to keep it quickfire. But my practical advice that people can do is something that was given to me recently, and it's all about when procrastination sets in. We often beat ourselves up about it, and we see it as a sign of weakness because it's a moment of unproduction. Is that the word? Unproductivity, whatever the word is. We're also conditioned that it's kind of lazy, and it gets a really bad press. But in reality, I see that as an opportunity, and that's because there's a wonderful book with the great advice in it, and it's written by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And the advice he gives is, at that moment in time when you are struggling to move forward with a project, it's not that you're being lazy. It's not that you're not doing the thing that you need to. You need to ask yourself, with this project, who, not how. Who, not how. And what that means is, ask yourself, who can help me move this forward? Because what we do is we spend an inordinate amount of time thinking to ourselves, I've got this thing to do. How am I going to do it? And we get ourselves into all sorts of brain funk, where we're like, oh, I can't do that. I'm never going to get to do that. That's going to take too long. And that's partly what procrastination is. So see procrastination as an opportunity to ask yourself that question. Actually, who, not how? Who can help me with this? Rather than me thinking about how I'm going to do it. And then look as far and wide as you can, because sometimes it might be Google might have somebody who's done something like this already that you could tap into. It might be someone in your network, might be a friend of a friend. It might be that you just pick up the phone and have a couple of conversations with people. But when in doing that, it starts to break down the resistance that you have. It helps you move forward. And in fact, in many cases, the who might be somebody who could actually deliver it for you rather than you having to deliver it for yourself. So procrastination is a powerful tool. Use it to ask who, not how.
I love that. It's like telling you that you need to change whatever you're doing. It's not just that, and I think we all, I know I struggle with procrastination sometimes. I'm like, what am I doing here? And you always get annoyed with yourself. You judge yourself. Whereas actually asking who is it that you got to get on the phone. I love it. Great bit of advice. Love it, love it, love it. Next one is, what is something from your world, and maybe it's under your Unblock, Unlock, Unleash, I don't know, I don't mind where it comes from, but from your world, that's something that our listeners in their worlds could go and do for themselves today, tomorrow, the next day, that might help them get some of the boom or the work joy, however you want to describe it, in their lives?
I'm going to make this available, actually, Beth, as a resource, if you're happy to do that.
Oh, amazing, yeah.
Because we've talked a lot about it today. The exercise that I do with my brands and my teams, I've made it available before, but I'll make it available for you and your listeners. But it's the movie poster process. And it doesn't matter if you allow yourself 20 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever, an hour. You can indulge yourself and have 3 or 4 hours for yourself if you like. The point is, it's about giving yourself some time and some space So rather than looking at the challenges that you're facing, or we're all changing the way that we work, we're all changing the way that we live. The world is moving at incredible pace. Sometimes to sit back and go, right, these are things that I'm thinking about. What will the future look like for me? How can I create this future for myself and visualize it in such a way that it inspires me and brings me joy?
Yeah.
Spend the time to do that. Use the movie poster tool to do that. And then from that, start to think to yourself, okay, how can I start moving towards this? What do I need to unblock? What do I need to unlock? And what are the actions that I need to unleash? But I'll make the movie poster tool available through your podcast and the links and reference links and everything, Beth, so that your listeners can have a go at it. And I think that will really help people to get a bit of a flavour of what the boom is about.
I love it. And I'm going to totally do it as well. So love that. We'll put it in the links, the show notes and the links on the social and everything, so we can get that happening. That's amazing. Brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So on that note as well, you said to obviously check out your website around the Nelson Mandela dancing story, which I'm totally going to go and have a look at after we finish today. Where can people find out more about you, follow you, get in touch, all of that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm absolutely always welcome to join the Boom community. So if you go on the website, I've got tools, free downloads, newsletters. I've got some free masterclasses that help people do some of the initial phases of Unblock, Unlock, Unleash. It's all there. You just drop your email in and then the stuff will be sent to you. It's a little program and there's videos and all sorts of things. I've got online masterclasses that people can actually buy as well, based on the book that I wrote, Creative Superpowers, I co-wrote with some brilliant creative minds. It was an Amazon bestseller, so buy the book, but also there's an online masterclass that will help that. And I do keynotes and bespoke programs all over the world. You can book me if you want to, but you can find all that information on my website. And also, again, I'm all for sharing knowledge and sharing insight and sharing understanding. So I do a monthly show too, which is called Boom Time, which I interview people like Rankin, June Sarpong, Caroline Rush, others. And I ask them, what is they're all creating the future in my mind. All these people that I interview, they're creating the future in some way. So I ask them to help us understand how they do that. What are they unblocking? What are they unlocking? What are they unleashing? And I create an insight sheet called a boom sheet at the end of each of those that I give to people so that they can take the insights from the show and try and apply them to their own world. So we've done everything from the future of content, the future of photography, the future of fashion, the future of careers, and there's loads more of that coming through. So yeah, find out, just join us on the boom somewhere, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts and feedback on the work that we're doing, and welcome them to the Boom family. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Scott, for coming on, for accepting my perseverance in getting in touch with you and asking me to come
pleasure,
here.
Beth. I've had a blast. It's been great. Really enjoyed. I love your energy. I love the name of the show. I just wish everyone could have as much WorkJoy in their lives as you have doing this. I think you do a fantastic job. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you. It's been great. And yeah, I love it. Maybe in a couple of years' time, we can come back on and do another one again when we've looked at what the next stage of all this stuff is. So thank you very much, Scott. It's been great to have you on the WorkJoy Jam.
Thanks, Beth. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Wow, a huge thank you to Scott for being on the WorkJoy Jam. There are so many different things that I'm taking from that conversation, but I think the main one is the most obvious one, which is that 3 stages of thinking about these things: the unblocking, looking at what you need to have in the future, where do you want to get to, what's that starting with the end in mind factor, what's stopping you getting there, what are the things that are getting in the way, how are you going to unblock them. Then looking at unlocking, what are the ideas? What does the change look like? How do you make that transformation happen? Really digging into it, getting people aligned, getting people talking about the things that matter to them. And then the unleashing, the discipline, the rigor, the making it happen, the getting the plan together, the accountability. I love how simple a model it is, but when you think about it, there is so much detail behind it and so many things that we can take either for ourselves, for our teams, for our organizations, for our businesses, and to take that thinking and to really play around with it, to really explore it with each other, and to get the joy while you're doing it as well. And I know Scott calls it the boom. I call it the WorkJoy. It's that real feeling of feeling great when you're working. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did recording it and having my conversation with Scott, who was a fantastic guest. If you'd like to find more about Scott, we will pop all of the details in the show notes, including the link to his great movie poster exercise, which you can go and do yourself. If you'd like to find out more about WorkJoy, do follow us on our social channels. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. You can also follow me, Beth Stallwood. I am on LinkedIn and Instagram as Beth Talks a Lot. And if you want to join our community, we have Club WorkJoy out there now. And Club WorkJoy is a growing community of people who are determined and passionate and really want to create and cultivate more joy in their working lives and in the lives of the people around them. So do come and have a look on our website, which is createworkjoy.com, to find out more about how you become a member of the club. There are also many other episodes of the WorkJoy Jam that you can go and listen to with lots of different people from lots of different perspectives. And I also have my program, the WorkJoy Way coaching program, 16 weeks that will really dive deep into you through some experiments, through one-to-one coaching and through group coaching to help you through transitions in your career, to look at where you want to go, to help you move from a slightly gloomy state into a more joyful state if that's where you are. I'd love to hear more about what you think of the podcasts. So do get in touch, hello@createworkjoy.com, or comment on any of the social media posts. Thank you all for listening today, and I will speak to you again soon.